Hi, everyone. It's Independence Day here in the United States, the day we celebrate the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the principles and values it represents. And I've spent part of today thinking about, because it also is the political season in the sense that both the Democrats and Republicans have kicked off their campaigns. As for the Democrats, it's with respect to who will be the nominee that will compete against Trump, and with Trump, he will be reminding people of what he perceives his accomplishments to be, and hopefully, from his point of view, be reelected president. Trump has ran basically on a campaign of what he refers to as "Make America Great Again." So I think about reflecting on what we consider greatness. My first interest in politics occurred when Ronald Reagan was elected president, and when he first ran for office, because he was the first person to run for office, at least in my lifetime, who talked about government being the problem and not the solution. And Reagan defined greatness in a way that I think many people need to be reminded of, which is significantly different than the way Trump defines greatness, even though Trump periodically has referred to Ronald Reagan. For example, with respect to Reagan and how he defined greatness, his defined greatness was lowering taxes, trying to attack government deficit, trying to attack government spending, opening up ourselves to free trade, and while projecting significant force, using it rarely and with great discretion. Also, at that point in time, when Americans felt very economically vulnerable, Reagan, and also they were fearful of then an Asian invasion from Japan. They basically many people thought that Japan was going to take over the U.S. economy. There was a point in time where the value of real estate in Tokyo exceeded the market capitalization of the New York Stock Exchange. I think it might have exceeded the market cap of all the major stock exchanges. So there was a fear that Japan, with their new trade surplus vis-a-vis the United States, their booming real estate prices, their booming stock market, and awash with U.S. dollars, were going to basically invade the country through foreign investment and take control over the United States with money received as a consequence of sending us automobiles and electronics, and other goods and services Americans valued and paid for, and then lived in economic insecurity because of the high unemployment rate. And if you were to study the stock market rallies that occurred both during the Reagan administration and during the Clinton administration, you'd find a lot of similarities. The similarities are the following. First, you will see strong dollar appreciation. So they coincided with a very strong dollar, including a strong dollar relative to gold. The other thing you will see is either declining to flat oil prices. The other thing that you will see is that they both had constraints on government spending and both committed to essentially low taxes. Clinton raised marginal taxes his first year in office, and that was the only tax increase that occurred during his administration, and he actually reduced the involvement in government in society. So many people, some people, I shouldn't say many, some people have said, actually there was a book written that actually called the Clinton administration an extension of the Reagan administration, and in many respects, while the rhetoric was different, the policies actually happened to have been very, very similar. Clinton embraced free trade. It was during the Clinton administration that we signed NAFTA. So Clinton was opening up to the world, not closing ourselves to the world. So now we come to Trump. And what does Trump represent and his definition of greatness? Apparently, Trump's definition of greatness seems to be weakness. Okay, we're fearful that a few immigrants in the country can overthrow the country and turn us into turmoil. So instead of welcoming people, we reject people. Okay? We especially reject things made in Asia, because apparently anything in Asia is also an existential threat to our country. He also believes that a trade deficit is not the sign of a consumer with significant purchasing power, but basically predatory countries trying to weaken our country by forcing Americans to buy things they don't really want to buy. So that definition of greatness seems pretty absurd to me, that greatness is predicated upon the concept of being fearful and being weak, as opposed to being strong and being confident. So for me, it's kind of a very perverted sense and definition of greatness. Okay, for me, greatness is that we open ourselves up to competing with everyone and having the confidence that we can compete with everyone, and that our success only depends upon what we do, independent of whatever anybody else does. So we should welcome whatever circumstances that exist in the world, and we have to have the confidence and faith that we have the capacity to overcome them. And apparently that's no longer the case. No longer the case is that if things are bad here, there has to be the fault of some third party. Okay, China, Europe, Mexico, Canada, it seems to be Guatemala, Honduras. Apparently for every problem that exists in the United States right now, somehow its problem is derived from some foreign source and some alien invasion that is causing all the ills of the country. And our only solution is spend more money, incur more debt, and not allow people to come into the country or goods to come into this country, and use any weapon possible to make that happen. And commit financial terrorism through through the SWIFT system, through economic sanctions, and through tariffs, and through building walls. It seems to me that a country that behaves like that doesn't seem to be a country where that is a great country. That's a fearful, weak country that feels so vulnerable and fragile that it has to implement all these acts against other countries in order to protect itself. The solution to economic ailments used to be a dosage of fiscal discipline and monetary discipline as well, where the dollar would strengthen relative to all currencies and to gold, and we would keep spending under control and our deficits under control, and keep government limited as a percentage. Its government's claim limited as a percentage of the size of the economy. Now we seem to have another definition of it. The definition of us is let's spend and spend and spend. Let's borrow and borrow and borrow. Okay? And instead of basically reducing future debt burdens, we're increasing future debt and tax burdens by having unrestrained spending and unrestrained deficits. So the economy now is basically a casino economy. It's a junkie economy. It's a zombie economy. It's basically very, very fragile. And the consequence of its fragility is that gold has started to rise and Bitcoin has risen dramatically. That's a consequence of the fact of people are losing faith in an economy where the solution to everything seems to be easier and easier money and fiscal irresponsibility. So essentially the marketplace is not that stupid, and many are understanding that no longer are we trying to cure our problems and bet on people, that we're now trying to basically blame each other, and that the only thing that the politicians seem to know is to spend more money and to have cheap money subsidize the spending of money, as opposed to making money more expensive so that we would have fiscal discipline. We're now looking to cheapen money, so we cheapen our currency, so we debase everything around us, including the debasement of ourselves. Okay, and as we debase ourselves and we debase everything around us, ultimately that'll end in the loss of freedom and independence, because ultimately this game will end, and the consequence of this game is that what the government will have to do in response to the growing problem is to further limit our freedoms and independence in order to sustain government itself. So I now view Independence Day very different. Okay, I think Independence Day that has now a new concept. Independence can only be expressed through purchase of Bitcoin. Okay, I say to fiat paper money. Okay, I say fuck you to any paper issued by any government. Okay, and that the only way we will be able to empower ourselves and express and maintain our independence, to make our own personal declaration of independence, is through buying and accumulating Bitcoin, okay? A currency that no government can manipulate. And that's the only way we can protect ourselves against a very fragile world where each day there's greater encroachment on our freedom and liberties. So for anyone that is very interested in preserving the principles that are embedded in the Declaration of Independence, okay, I think that as you read those principles, I would think that the people who wrote that document, and if you really take a look at some of the things Jefferson said about banks and money, that they would embrace Bitcoin. And so that I would like to think that I would like to express that basically my new appreciation for Independence Day is that independence, that Bitcoin is independence. And if you value independence, the only way of expressing being able to insert your independence in this world is by buying and accumulating Bitcoin. That's the way of saying to any authority figure whatsoever. Okay? And either you can determine to be independent, sovereign individual, or to be a victim and enslaved by others.